I'm not going to tell you how important protein is. We all know that. But you know what's really crucial? To distribute the protein evenly throughout the whole day. This is especially crucial for female health because our Welcome back to another episode of Truly Well. And oh my god, the last days I truly didn't feel well at all. I had some sort of food poisoning and it was just really awful. I woke up in the middle of the night with the worst nausea, and I really feel like there's nothing worse than nausea. So yeah, the last couple of days were really not my best, but I'm happy to be back on top. And also, it's really crazy how much it puts your health into perspective when you're sick. No matter how much money you have, how successful you are, or whatever, nothing is more important than your health. And this actually perfectly coincides with today's topic because we're going to dive deep into the daily habits of the healthiest women in the world according to science. My number one goal, not just with this episode, but really with my whole podcast, is to really strip it down and remove all the noise and figure out what are the most important things for our health? What are the things that really make a difference and that move the needle? Because I think, especially in today's world, that has become so crazy difficult because it's just insane how much we're being bombarded with information every day about what we should do, the latest trends, and just the wellness industry is really intense, right? Also on social media, I guess maybe it depends a little bit in what algorithm you fall, but for me, it's so often that I feel so overwhelmed and just really like I'm not doing nearly enough for my health when I see all these reels and where you hear all about like the 10-step morning routine and taking a cold plunge every day, doing sauna, eating bone broth. Like, when should I do all of this, right? It's just impossible. And I have spent so much time in the last years, actually, really learning everything I can, especially on female health. And for this episode specifically, I've combined the research from the Blue Zones, which is one of my favorite topics. I'm sure you're familiar with the Blue Zones. Those are the 5 regions in the world where researchers noticed that the people are just living so much longer than the rest of the world. So longevity is crazy there. And those regions are Sardinia in Italy, Icaria in Greece, Loma Linda in California, Okinawa in Japan, and Nicoya in Costa Rica. And it's actually not about the geography, but it's all about their habits. So that's what we're going to talk about in combination with the main learnings I had from my health coach training. I did a holistic health coach training a few years ago and just really want to bring all that knowledge to you. And I would say, let's dive right in with habit number 1, which is definitely my favorite one because I swear to you, I've noticed such a crazy strong difference, especially on my hormones. So my cycle has improved so much, and it's called hara hachibu, which is a Japanese saying meaning belly 80% full. So it's a habit of the Okinawa people in Japan that means to eat slowly and stop when you're feeling comfortably satisfied, so not stuffed. In combination with also eating early, so at least 3 hours before going to bed. And the benefits those two things have in combination are crazy. The number one thing is that it improves your insulin sensitivity so much, which is just crazy good for our health because that improves our hormone balance, our heart and metabolic health. It's so good for our liver, our brain, energy, and mood. It lowers chronic inflammation. It's also amazing for our sleep. It regulates our appetite and it reduces oxidative stress. But I definitely have to say, I feel like it's quite a challenging principle actually because first of all, what does it even mean 80% full? And it definitely took me quite a while to figure it out for myself. Takes practice for sure and to be super mindful. But if I would have to describe it, I think it's this really sweet spot of feeling very well nourished, which I think is crucial. We want to nourish our body, and this is really not about restriction at all, but we want to feel very well nourished and nicely satisfied. And we could potentially eat just a little bit more, but if we do that, then we would feel really full. So, kind of stopping right before that point. And I want to make a quick disclaimer here because I do think it's important to say that this principle is probably not the best for anyone who's struggling with an eating disorder. Because again, this is really not about restriction, but I can see that it can become a sort of restriction, right? And I actually have a really bad case of anorexia in my family, and it's horrible to see what it does to your body when it's undernourished and just how bad it is for your health. And so, if it's something you're struggling with, I would highly recommend to find someone you can work with that supports you and helps you in that. But I feel like it's a topic for a whole other episode where we can dive in because it's actually also a topic I have struggled with. So I would love to explore this in much more detail. But so this principle is really to tune in as best as you can with your body and be as mindful as you can to really notice what your body needs, because that also changes from day to day and especially with our cycle, right? The days before our period where we're so much more hungry, and the body really also needs more calories during the second half of our cycle. So during the luteal phase, we burn up to 500 more calories, which is crazy, right? That's so much. So yeah, we want to be so attentive to our needs and really notice, okay, today my body just needs more, so I'll also eat more. And that would also be my number one tip to practice hara hachibu, to be fully present while eating. Ideally, also not watch anything while eating, which is something I have to say, oh, I find such a shame because I enjoy this so much, watching a good YouTube video or a show while eating your favorite food. To me, that's such a like comfort moment. And I want to say at this point that I think it's so important to still leave room to make exceptions, because especially if there's something that you enjoy so much and it just really is something you absolutely love and you maybe look forward to the whole day, I think we really shouldn't deprive ourselves of those moments. And for me, I've just decided, for example, with eating something while watching, to do it once in a while, kind of make it an exception. Then I'm actually also appreciating it so much more, but not completely forbidding myself that, but still doing it, just trying to do it kind of as rarely as possible. But it is in life just about balance. And I think we really cannot underestimate also how important joy is. And I really think in some cases it kind of evens out the negatives so that net it's positive. But of course, we still need to set boundaries for ourselves and be disciplined. But I think now and then it's fine. Another tip, what the Okinawa people actually do, is to eat from smaller plates, also to chew a lot and to put your fork down in between bites. Another important point is emotional eating, which I'm definitely struggling with a lot. I just really have this tendency, especially when I'm super stressed or when something bad happens, that I compensate with eating. And there, I've just been really trying to find different coping mechanisms. So whenever I feel that need of then just eating whatever I can, I try to do a 5-minute breathing exercise or going for a walk. I actually feel like that's the thing that helps me the most. Going for a walk, listening to something, but just really not giving in to that first impulse, but dealing with it in a different way. And the last tip is to get into a habit of storing your leftovers no matter how small they are. So even if there's just a little bit left, still putting it in a food container, placing it in the fridge, then we're not throwing it out, we're not wasting any food, but we're also not forcing ourselves to overeat or to kind of get over that magical 80%. Oh, one more thing that also helps me so much is to remind myself of the negative effects when I'm overeating, because overeating is really so bad for our health. It's actually crazy. So, the short term effects are, of course, things like bloating, nausea, reflux, and heartburn. It also spikes our blood sugar like crazy and then crashes it, which causes fatigue, brain fog, cravings, irritability. And especially if it's a late dinner, it impairs our fat burning overnight and can also disrupt our sleep, which we definitely do not want. And the medium and long term effects are even worse, because if you constantly overeat, it actually dysregulates your appetite. So you don't even really realize anymore when you're full. And your hunger signals also become so much louder and stronger. Then it causes insulin resistance, which increases our risk of type 2 diabetes. It causes more abdominal fat, skin breakouts, disrupts our cycles, causes cardiovascular disease, and in the worst cases, even certain cancers. So there it gets really dramatic. So yeah, the conclusion is just we want to avoid overeating as much as we can. But talking about food, this brings us to our habit number 2, which is that we want to try to eat as many different foods as we possibly can, because that is really the best thing we can do for our gut health. And I think by now we all know how important our gut health is and how closely it's connected with our brain. To me, that's still so fascinating, right? How there's this direct link and how our gut influences our mood so much. I think that's really, really crazy. So, the more variety we have in our food, the more diversity we have in our gut microbiome, which in turn lowers inflammation, supports our gut lining, it regulates our appetite, it improves, again, insulin sensitivity. You're going to hear this all the time, but this is really such a win. Whatever we can do to improve our insulin sensitivity and balance our blood sugar, we should do. It's also super good for our brain, our skin, our hormones. And the stronger our microbiome is, the better it's also able to bounce back from all kinds of stress like travel or illness or antibiotics, especially. And the goal is to aim for minimum 30 plants a week, which I know is a lot. But so we really want to try to focus especially on fibers, so vegetables, fruits, nuts, seeds, and especially beans and lentils. Beans are actually the most evidence-backed longevity food. So eating beans every day is one of the best things we can do for ourselves. So put those like on top of your list. But we also want to focus on prebiotics like garlic, onion, asparagus, cabbage, dandelion greens, seaweeds, then polyphenols, which we can find in berries, cocoa, coffee, tea, olive oil, herbs and spices. So those actually count as well. And also colorful vegetables. And of course, fermented food. So kefir, sauerkraut, kimchi. Our gut really loves fermented food. So try to throw them into your diet as regularly as you can. But I know 30 different foods every week is definitely a challenge. So a few tips I have for you is to buy mixed bags, especially frozen vegetables, where you can just buy 5 or 6 different kinds like in one bag. By the way, frozen vegetables are amazing. And I think there's sometimes this belief that buying them fresh is better, but actually, when they're frozen, they are being harvested right at like the perfect ripeness and then frozen with all the minerals and nutrients. And that can actually be so much better than having them non-frozen and then being transported over a long time and so on. Frozen vegetables or also, mixed salads or mixed nuts. Like whenever there's a mix, we go for it. Also, deciding for every day a different grain. Let's say Monday it's rice, Tuesday it's quinoa, Wednesday it's barley. So kind of really rotating and coming back to the herbs and spices, like I said, those count as well. So with every meal, trying to put at least 2 herbs or spices in there as well, because yeah, all of a sudden we're actually easily at our 30 plants a week, hopefully. Let's come to habit number 3, which is about protein, and stick with me because I'm not going to tell you how important protein is. We all know that. We should really try and get enough protein every single day. But you know what's really crucial? To distribute the protein evenly throughout the whole day. This is especially crucial for female health because our muscles and bones and hormones and our appetite, they work on a per meal clock and not a daily total. Because each time that we eat protein, it switches on our muscle protein synthesis, also called MPS, and that is our body's repair and rebuild mode. So when we eat protein with every meal, we switch on this MPS every single time instead of kind of wasting all these opportunities because we want this MPS. We want it to work, we want to trigger it regularly. And so, for example, if you eat a very small protein breakfast and then a very high protein dinner, it only fully triggers our MPS once, which is a total shame because it's just such an important function to maintain and build muscle. But also, having protein at each meal helps with, again, balancing our blood sugar, reducing our cravings, and it helps to prevent late night overeating, which we also already learned is really bad. So for every meal, we really want to try to have our protein in there. And I have, by the way, so many what I eat videos on my YouTube channel where you can find lots of different recipe inspiration, specifically on high protein recipes. And I'm also planning to film a lot more in the coming weeks when we hopefully soon have a kitchen again, because I'm currently living the hotel life. I think it's now 3 weeks that we're living in a hotel in Dubai. And yeah, I've come to a point where I've just accepted it, but hopefully it's only a few more days and then we're gonna leave. Anyways, let's come to point number 4, which is all about sleep. I'm not gonna tell you to aim for your 7 to 9 hours of sleep every night because that we all know. But what I'm going to tell you is that we want to prioritize as much as we possibly can to have a very regular sleep schedule. So, going to bed and waking up at the same time every day. The benefits this has on our body are again just huge. First of all, it really strengthens our circadian signals, which helps so much with falling asleep faster, but also with staying asleep and with keeping our energy stable throughout the whole day. Then it really improves our sleep quality because consistency helps our bodies to cycle through the different sleep stages in the right proportions, especially the deep sleep and the REM sleep. And that in turn is really crucial for our memory, our muscle recovery, growth hormone release, and emotional processing. Because during the sleep, our brain is dumping so much stuff that we experienced throughout the day, and that is really, really crucial for our emotions. Then, of course, it helps with our insulin sensitivity. It helps with regulating our appetite, it improves our mood and focus, and it helps with cycle regularity. But so, what does consistency mean? Ideally, we want to try to keep the variations under 60 minutes, even better, under 30 minutes. So, if we can kind of keep that window within 30 minutes each day and night, that would be amazing. But the question I've been asking myself is, should we prioritize the sleep consistency over the sleep length? So, is it more important to keep that regularity than kind of getting your 8 hours? And the answer is that yes, in most cases, it's more important to have that regularity. So, in cases where you go to bed later, you should still get up at the same time instead of sleeping in and then rather taking a nap during the day and then going to bed earlier again the next night. But I do think if you have accumulated a lot of sleep debt, for example, over the last nights, or you also have something really, really, really important that day, or you need to drive or need to do anything where you need to be kind of on top and fully focused, then you probably should prioritize getting the 8 hours. But apart from that, we want to do whatever we can to stick to that regular sleep time. Now, let's dive into habit number 5, which is about movement. And that's a really interesting one because in the blue zones, the people there don't actively work out. They accumulate movement throughout their whole day through things like housework, gardening, walking, especially uphill, or also running social errands. And so, what we can take away from that, because obviously they live a little bit different lives than us, we want to try to integrate movement into our day as best as we can, especially if you are spending a lot of time seated throughout your day. We want to try to get up at least every 30 minutes if that's possible. So, breaking up long periods of sitting. One of the number one hacks I have there is to drink as much water as you can throughout the day because then you just have to pee all the time and you automatically get up. And there you're just really hitting two nails at the same time, right? Because you're hydrating and you're also getting moving. But then trying to think of as many ways as you can of how you can move your body during the day. If it's maybe going for a walk while you're on a meeting or also walking around at home. I think sometimes we underestimate how much we can actually also move at home while, for example, doing something like when you're on the phone, like walking around in your living room, or any way you can think of integrating more steps and just in general more movement, and also finding ways to spend as much time as you can outside because being outside has the most amazing effect on our body and on our nervous system, especially, which we're going to talk about in a moment. So, yeah, any opportunity you have to move and to be outside, take it. And then something else that has become more and more scientifically proven is how impactful weight training is for female health. Doing 2 to 3 times a week of weight training has such huge benefits for our health, especially the older we get. And this is a topic that I want to dive into with you in a lot more detail in one of the next episodes, where I also want to have an expert on because I actually only recently got started with weight training. I've been doing only yoga and Pilates and sometimes bar. And there you're, of course, working a lot with your body weight. And I also include light weights and ankle weights and so on. But recently, I've also been trying to integrate the weight training, but still a total beginner at it. So we're going to talk about it much more. But now I want to talk with you about nervous system regulation, which is definitely my by far favorite topic because I truly believe that having a regulated nervous system is true success in life. Because especially today in the world we live in, it's become just so difficult to have a regulated nervous system because We are just living in a time where it's so glorified to hustle and work as much as you can. And we're just being exposed to so much stress. It's crazy. And now we're actually coming to the most fascinating blue zone habit because for them, it's less about eliminating stress, which is literally also impossible, but it's more about how to release it. And what the people in the blue zones do is that they have these daily rituals to unwind. So, for example, the Okinawas in Japan, they pause every afternoon to remember their ancestors. Or the Italians in Sardinia have an evening glass of wine with their friends, which actually brings me back to the whole point of still doing things that bring you lots of joy or and for example lots of relaxation even if they're not the healthiest, because obviously drinking wine is not good for our health. But if it's something that brings you together with other people, that gives you that social connection and just helps you to kind of deeply relax and release stress, then I would argue it's a good thing. But of course, everything in measures, right? Because I guess having alcohol every day, like overall, is then not good, right? But we definitely still want to find these moments of joy. Then, what they also have is a really nice perspective on life. In Nicoya in Costa Rica, they have this plan de vida. So they see challenges as part of a bigger picture. Or again, in Japan, they have ikigai, which I'm sure you also already heard about, which is just all about having a really strong purpose. And in general, they just really honor rhythms so much instead of pushing through. It's, for example, super common to take naps. They eat their meals very slowly, like we also already talked about. And integrate movement throughout their whole day. So we want to try to do at least one small thing every day that allows us to release stress. It could be 5 minutes of meditation or breathing, a gentle yoga practice, again, being in nature, being outside, journaling, listening to calming music, walking barefoot. This is actually my number one. I am the strongest believer in the benefits of walking barefoot. But you know what? We are actually going to dive into the whole topic about nervous system regulation and all these habits in much more detail also in another episode. There's so much coming, and I don't want to make this episode too long. So let's actually move on to habit number 7, because the healthiest women in the world prioritize having strong social ties. So in the blue zones, the people really prioritize multi generational living, friend circles, and community rituals. And I have to say, this is definitely, of all these habits, the one that I struggle with the most, or that I would say is the weakest for me, because we have just been moving so much over the last years, and it has just been really challenging to kind of build a close social circle in my vicinity because all my friends live in different cities. And right now, the main form of kind of social connection for me is through voice messages on WhatsApp. And even though that is, of course, still really, really nice, and I'm so grateful for the friends that I have, to me, it's just not the same as being in the same room, sitting across from each other, hugging, and just being together. And so I really, really miss that so much. And I cannot wait for us to hopefully soon have a fixed base again and just really build our social circle, because I am dreaming so much about having, for example, a weekly book club meeting or a weekly dinner party where there's just these kind of occasions where I get together with all my friends and spending time together. And yeah, I cannot wait for that. But if that is also a point that is difficult for you, especially maybe also finding good friends, my number one recommendation is to expose yourself as much as you can to situations or places where you are going to meet people that are like minded. For me, that has always been yoga studios. I cannot tell you how many good friends I found through yoga classes and actually also my yoga teacher trainings, because you are just so like minded there and you just have immediately something to connect over and to bond with. And it's just also such an easy way to, after class, be like, how did you like the class? How are you doing? And kind of like just really such an easy entryway. So definitely, whatever interests or hobbies you have, try to go to places where you will find people that have the same. And overall, just prioritizing these social connections and making time for them every day, no matter how much is going on. I think it really, really is crucial to make time for your friends and your family. And to also always remember that in order to have good friends, you also need to be a good friend, right? So, yeah, just really making it the top priority. Now we have arrived at our last habit, which is actually a little bit of a tricky one, but I still wanted to include it. But it's about supplements. And I know, of course, this is so dependent on your body, also on your current life situation and your circumstances, your lifestyle, and so on. But there are a few supplements that are just very, very common to be deficient in women, but that are also really super important. And the first one is magnesium. It is so beneficial for our sleep, for relaxation, for insulin sensitivity, of course. And the recommendation is to supplement with 200 to 400 milligrams in the evening and to ideally go for magnesium glucinate because that's a little bit gentler on the stomach. Then another one is vitamin D3. Of course, especially if you're living somewhere where you don't get as much sun exposure, especially also during the winter. And that is really important for our bone health, for our immune system, for muscle function. And there we just want to avoid the mega doses because you can actually take too much of it. So we want to be careful with that. And the third one is omega-3, which is the most important to lower inflammation, especially if you eat less than 2 servings of fatty fish a week. It really, really is highly, highly recommended to supplement with omega-3. What you should absolutely get tested on is especially iron, because that is also very, very common to be low in women. And low iron can cause fatigue, brain fog, and also hair loss. And then also B12 would be really important to get tested on. I mean, ideally, we should get tested on all the vitamins and minerals regularly, but if you get tested just on a few, then definitely check your iron and your B12. And then there's one more supplement I quickly want to touch on, and that is creatine. I've been hearing about it more and more, especially recently. But the thing is that I feel like I haven't really heard enough about it yet. And I still want to do more research about it to really be sure that it is beneficial for female health. And that's also why I don't want to recommend it at this point, but I want to put it out there. And I'm definitely going to give you an update on it as soon as I have spent more time researching it and really figured out if it is good or not, because I do think it really is a bit tricky to figure out what is marketing and what is actually truly good for us. Because I feel like there were so many things in the last years where at some point you heard, oh my God, it's the best thing ever. For example, coconut oil. There was this time where coconut oil was the non plus ultra, where it was the best thing you could do for your body. And then just a few months later, it was literally the worst thing you could do. So I'm just really a strong believer in doing your own research and, of course, also always listening to your body and making sure that it feels good to you because we are just all really so crazy bio individual as well and so different. And so always coming back to yourself. But I really hope that this episode was helpful for you. Definitely let me know if you have any questions, thoughts, feedback, whatever. I really want to hear it. So put it down below in the comments. And I also, of course, want to say thank you so much for listening, for being here. Especially your comments on my first episode meant the world for me because it is really scary to put yourself out there and to just kind of share everything. And so it really meant so much more to me than you know. And I cannot wait to see you in next week's episode. Bye bye.